folks, welcome to the channel, The Agnostic Philosopher. That's me, I'm Don. I was a philosophy major at Rutgers, my alma mater, some years back, and I have maintained my proclivity for curiosity. Leonard Susskind, Arguments for Agnosticism. I'm assuming these are arguments in favor of agnosticism, but I don't know. This is a reaction. I generally like to just see these thoughts coming and experience them for the first time on camera. You can see my face. I evidently have a fairly obvious facial expression. I can't really hide what I'm thinking well. But I'm giving a shout out to Trevor Wongsman, who just left a comment recently. He found the channel and was happy to find a fellow agnostic. So I think there are a number of folks who are out there who are sort of middle of the road, leave the door open for there to be a God, but don't find the quote-unquote sacred texts dispositive or overly convincing, but aren't quite sure if there actually is a God. So it's sort of in the middle. That's me. So I could consider any arguments, pro, anti, and it just doesn't move me emotionally either way. Some things move me emotionally if they're blatantly idiotic to me. Obviously, I'm the frame of reference on this because I'm me. But Leonard Susskind is a theoretical physicist at Stanford University and the founding director of the Stanford Institute for Theoretical Physics. He was born in 1940 in the South Bronx. That's pretty badass. It wasn't as dangerous in the 40s as it is now. I think J-Lo was born in the South Bronx too. But let's find out what the arguments in favor, against agnosticism are in his mind.
Leonard, why isn't agnosticism the best philosophical position for everyone to take?
Well, first of all, what does agnosticism mean? I'm fairly sure about some things, less sure about other things. I am fairly sure no supernatural entity will intervene if I step off a cliff. I will fall. The laws of gravity will do that to me. I am fairly sure that if my genetic makeup happens to be of a certain kind, no matter how hard I pray, I will get cancer.
Right.
I am fairly sure that God doesn't intervene to be able to move electrons around in a way that does things that we or he or she likes. There's no evidence for that. All the evidence points in the opposite direction, that the laws of nature go the way they go. If you were to ask me about the very beginnings of the universe, the origins of it, why it is there, does it have a purpose, could an intelligence have been involved in creating it, and so forth?
It's always, I've said this on many videos, everything's about origins for we, the people, because we are wired for pattern recognition, and it starts with the beginning. Our pattern recognition has a starting point. That's what we call it as. I don't know if philosophy of language people would say about this, but it starts there so that we can put the pieces together, not only for our survival, but for better outcomes on a daily basis. A little bit more happiness, perhaps, a little less sadness. But it goes back to, about beginnings, because beginnings can, and then we fill in some of the pieces along the way, might be able to predict where it's heading.
There, I would have to say I'm completely agnostic. I'm completely agnostic to the point where I just don't feel that we are anywhere near understanding enough about the world to even address those questions. Not only not to answer them, but to even ask them properly, to make sense out of the questions. So I would say I'm almost beyond being an agnostic. That to say I'm not sure if there's a God or not a God, I have the feeling that it's the wrong question.
Or that we're not at the point where we can formulate this kind of question.
Right. I always think of it as a kind of curtain. There's the things that are hidden behind the curtain, there are the things which are exposed in front of the curtain. It's always the tendency to believe that the things which are behind the curtain are controlled by supernatural, and the things which are in front of the curtain that we can see are not controlled by the supernatural.
Well, the history of science moves the curtain back.
And the history of science just keeps moving the curtain back. But it never gets it quite all the ways back, and we never really know how far it has to go.
Right.
And so that's the situation. We get pushed back to the universe earlier and earlier and earlier, and always that curtain is still there. What's behind the curtain? If I knew what was behind the curtain, I would publish it.
That's the old thing about the envelope of knowledge, where if you consider like what we know to be here, or conceptualize it as a balloon, and what's on the outside of it is what we don't know, and the more we know, it expands our field of knowledge, but it also expands the field of what we don't know because it generates more questions. As I don't want to say as it should, because that's a normative. I don't know what should be and shouldn't be, because that does bespeak a creator and that there's some kind of otherworldly law or principle or rule in place that we ought to follow. There's another normative that we would do well to follow for better results. I don't know if that's the case.
Some would point to the very comprehensibility of the universe, which didn't have to be, as, if not a evidence of a supernatural intelligence, at least consistent with what such a supernatural being would have created.
Yeah, it does look like there are patterns in the universe, that the universe respects certain laws, certain principles. First of all, could we live in a universe that had no pattern? What would it mean for it not to have pattern? Just complete randomness?
So as you push further and further back, what is the end point? Do you see the laws of physics ever be self-explaining?
I can't tell. And I think it is a very interesting and big question. Another way of asking it is, could the universe have been otherwise? Mm-hmm. And I don't think we know. I have no idea. I think it's way, way beyond what we are presently capable of answering.
I love this. I've been told I'm a nerd by some folks. I love these questions. I love the philosophical implications. I love the not knowing. I love the honesty in not knowing. I love the questions. We are literally schooled to get answers from a young age. 2 + 2 = 4. That's the right answer. We are schooled syntax, grammar. We study Spanish. What is the verb conjugation, or what have you, or physics, or chemistry, or probability. And you take tests and you put your answers down. That's where you are literally schooled. Our polarity is toward getting answers. And I love the tenor of this. Well, of his responses were about questions. He's looking at the questions. Are we asking the right questions? It goes Douglas Adams in The Hitchhiker's Guide to was it Galaxy or Universe? I know he also had So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, and there were 5 books in the trilogy. That gives you an idea of this sense of humor. We had the answer to the universe. The answer was 42. And Ford Prefect, as I recall, and Zaphod Beeblebrox, Ford Prefect was out on a mission to scout the galaxy or the universe to find the question. And I love that classic British humor. But questions are undervalued, the very nature of them. And I should probably think more about what he said about what's on the other side of the curtain, and that we can't even formulate the right question, like, is there a God or isn't there? How do you'd want to define God or come up with some idea of God? Is God an independent, all-knowing agent? It's not even essential that he, she, or it is paying attention to what we're doing here on Earth, as far as if laws were set in motion and then he's off on some other part of the universe or multiverse or elsewhere, something we can't conceptualize, but we still are going to abide by that which was set in motion here. Is that the type of agency, the being that we're talking about, or some other? But I think once we have some kind of parameter, some sense, maybe it's kind of like the definition of class that Supreme Court Justice, I forget what his name was, I think it was in the 70s when he was ruling on pornography. It was a case brought against either Hustler or Playboy. I think it was Hustler. And about what constitutes, I think it was hardcore porn at the time. And he said, look, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. And is that the type of thing we're dealing with here, where we just have a sense of what a supreme being would be in light of the questions we're asking? I don't know, because to me, for example, the various ideas of what constitutes the singularity are almost identical in feel to what it is to postulate that there is a God. Neither is provable, a la Sir Karl Popper. We weren't there. We can't duplicate it. The fact that everything came from an infinitely dense point is just as incredible as postulating that there is a being that created everything. Neither is separated from the other. In the sense that we weren't there, we can't test it in a laboratory. We might be able to see some cosmic background radiation and draw inferences from that, possibly even more than inferences, but that's basically all we've got anyway, which makes the questions that much more fascinating and sometimes that much more difficult. So in a sense, when you ask a question, it limits the answer. Unless you allow definitions, unless you allow nuances, unless you allow the door to be open to a curtain being on the other side of that door, that, you know what, in the end of this discourse, we might not know. That's philosophy. Those who are fans of the New Testament, Paul railed against philosophy because he said he didn't like questions. They only lead to questions. I'm a fan of philosophy. I like questions. I was schooled for answers. Answers are prone to error. Are questions prone to error? I don't know. Like he said, it may be a misguided question. How would you even know unless you knew what the answer was? So there it is, guys. I like him. I'm going to do more. I love a Jew from the South Bronx. I'm from Jersey, so I absolutely love this. I love, well, my favorite accent in the world, well, it might now be Kentucky, but Brooklyn. But I'm a Jersey guy, so when I hear something New York, I'm all in. Count me in. But very bright dude. I'll be checking out more of his stuff. And this is why he's an agnostic. So Trevor, if you're still with me on this one, that might have fed your soul, my friend. All right, guys, have a great day. See you on another video. Please subscribe and like it. And keep thinking philosophically.